would anticipate, with looking ahead at our key contracts that we'd like to address, we'll be all in. I would anticipate we'll be all in at the end of this year. We'll be going all in on different people than you've done in the past.
All right, Jerry Jones' definition of all in may be different from some Cowboys definition of all in, or maybe Cowboys fans, I should say. But a couple of moves came out of Dallas over the weekend. Linebacker Leighton Vander Esch retired. They also released wide receiver Michael Gallup. Now all eyes turn to Dak and his contract. So, Adam, what more can you tell us about his situation?
Well, Laura, as Field Yates reported today, he's reworked his contract, but it's a situation where he still has not gotten the long-term extension, and he's still sitting on the Cowboys' books for over $55.5 million. So it's still a big number. And the fact of the matter is that is really stifling to their salary cap. And Jerry Jones says they're all in, but the fact of the matter is basically they can't do a lot because of that number. And they're in a situation where after this year, Dak Prescott can become a free agent. He can't be tagged. He can't be traded. So this becomes a real quandary that's only going to grow in stature as time goes on.
Yeah, reallocating $4 million of the $59 million that they're dealing with there. Mina, what do you think about the Cowboys not committing to a long-term deal with Dak? It has to say something, right?
Yeah, we'll see. There's still time left. I just can't help but marvel at how much leverage Dak Prescott has. Like, we talk a lot about Kirk Cousins being a legend at the bank because of the way, he played things out with the tag and then getting those guaranteed deals. Dak Prescott has followed a fairly similar, not exactly the same playbook. Because think about this, Laura. Kirk Cousins this year signed a contract as a true free agent for 4 years, $180 million. If Dak Prescott had been a free agent this offseason, $50 million a year, easily. If he's a free agent next year, I can only imagine the kind of money he were to get if he were to play next year at the same level he played at during the regular season. I realize that's an operative phrase there. This year. And to that end, there's no reason why he should take any sort of discount from the Dallas Cowboys, especially given, as you guys laid out, his contract does, and the current cap hit does prevent them from doing certain signings and spending their money. From Dallas's perspective, I'll say this. The likelihood that they would move on from Dak Prescott and improve at the quarterback position is very, very low. Coming off of this show where we're talking about how desperate Minnesota is now and the kind of trades they'd be making, and it's still just a shot in the dark in the draft, Dallas has one of those quarterbacks that every team wants. And so I feel like they should be motivated to get something done. I don't know if they will based on how this is dragged out. And Dak Prescott has all the leverage in the world.
Yeah, there is time. Look, the $5 million they converted over the weekend, there was a deadline on that. That was a roster bonus, and if it had triggered, they wouldn't have been able to convert that money. They still have almost $28 million in salary this year that they could knock down and convert into bonus if they did a restructure. The problem is every time you do a restructure, it adds to the 2025 cap charge, which is already up to $40 million, and they don't want that to get any bigger. So I think the interesting point here is they added 2 void years to the contract. They could not do that without Dak Prescott's permission. So at least we know they're talking and that he was willing to accommodate them to that extent. I think the news of today of the roster bonus being restructured makes me more optimistic that they might get to an extension at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like last week, even in the heat of free agency, there really wasn't much conversation around any of it. And once again, you got to think they got to pay CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons. There are other players that they're going to have to take care of. Either way, we'll keep an eye on what's happening in Dallas. Mina said it best. It's the great play in the regular season and the maybe not as great play in the postseason. You can't blame Dak for all that. And I'm glad I got to just say all of that to Ravens into the Super Bowl next season.
I think it is. I actually think there's a better chance that the Ravens take a little bit of a step back. When you look at everything they've lost, you can argue that Derrick Henry doesn't need an offensive line, but the fact is they've lost 3 offensive linemen so far in free agents, or 2 free agent, 1 trade. They lost some key pieces on defense. They lost 3 members of their defensive coaching staff, including the coordinator, who's now the Seahawks head coach. There is going to be a lot of new in Baltimore next year. Derrick Henry is part of it, but he's not the solution, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm of two minds of this. You know, I agree with Dan that I don't think Derrick Henry is the piece that puts him over the top. This is already a dominant run game. I like the signing, I like the fit, but they can only be so much better on the ground. I think where I quibble a little bit with Dan is those losses. A lot of the players who the Ravens lost in free agency are still available. I believe Kevin Zeitler, the starting guard, is yet to be signed, unless I'm mistaken. Kyle Van Noy, Jadeveon Clowney. The Ravens have a history of bringing in veteran pass rushers at the last second in free agency, and then they play really well for them. I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing happens again this year with this defense.
Let's keep an eye on that. And to the Jets, who are desperately doing what they can to set up Aaron Rodgers for more success next season. They added Tyron Smith to their offensive line in a concerted effort to strengthen protection in front of Rodgers when we should finally get to see him really play. Now, the Jets also signed guard John Simpson and traded for right tackle Morgan Moses to go along with Tyron Smith. They'll have 3 new starters on that offensive line that was 30th in the NFL in pass block win rate last season. Zach Wilson really was the guy who dealt with the brunt of that. But Adam, what more can you tell us about how the Jets went about addressing their offensive line?
Laura, this has been the focus of this team going into the offseason. It was no secret they had to upgrade the offensive line and upgrade it dramatically, particularly with Aaron Rodgers coming back off the torn Achilles. And so they went out and they addressed it right away. John Simpson in free agency to play the left guard position. They go and trade for Morgan Moses, who was on the Jets roster before and who the team really wanted back. And they swapped some picks and got him back. And then they get Tyron Smith to play left tackle. They bring back Elijah Vera-Tucker, who they're hoping is healthy next season. Their former second-round pick, Joe Tippmann at center. Now they've got what they believe are to be 5 quality starters to place in front of Aaron Rodgers. And now we go into the draft, and if there's another offensive lineman, they always could add more depth by signing Tyron Smith. It now gives them a little bit of added flexibility in the draft. They're not locked into taking an offensive tackle. Maybe they look at a wide receiver. Maybe they look at another position. But they don't have to come out of the first round with another offensive lineman with all these moves.
Yeah, depth at O-line, especially with an older quarterback, can always help. You know, what do you think of the Jets' plan for their offensive line so far?
I mean, that offensive line you saw there, that's a really good offensive line. Like, we talk a lot about protecting Aaron Rodgers. Something that occurs to me looking at that group is how happy Breece Hall should be, because he had terrible run blocking last year. And you want to talk about those Ravens players that they got did a fantastic job run blocking. Simpson was particularly a revelation for me last year. But, and there is a but, you know, I said that group is excellent if they're healthy. Right? Tyron Smith has suffered through injuries quite a bit over the course of his career. He played a fair amount last year. To Adam's point, I do think it would be wise for New York to continue augmenting this line, especially with Whip Smith on a 1-year deal in the draft, especially given how many talented offensive tackles there are. Even if that tackle they draft doesn't start year 1, it would be wise for them to continue adding in a group that has been such an issue for them in the past.
No question about it. Look, I mean, Tyron Smith is going to be great for the Jets when he's on the field. The question is, how many times will he be on the field? 2015 is the last year in which Tyron Smith played a full season without missing any games due to injury. That is a long time ago. Now, the question is, what kind of year is this at age 33? Because he's had years where he's played 13 games, and he's had years where he's played 2 games or 4 games. If he misses significant time, they need to have a great backup plan. If he's going to miss 2 or 3 games, I think they can weather that, and the high-end production they'll get from him while he's on the field is certainly worth it. Look, it's a bit of a high wire act with a couple of 33-year-old tackles, but they're good. And let's face it, everything the Jets are doing right now is a high wire act around 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers trying to win as quickly as possible before, you know, everybody goes their own separate ways.
That was funny the way you ended that. I was interested to see what you're going to say. All right.
One thing. I don't really know how to end it. Yeah.
No, neither do I. I do want to point this out. They do have the 10th overall pick. So if they ended up going with an offensive lineman, the Jets haven't drafted an O-lineman in the top 10 since taking DeBrickashaw Ferguson 4th overall in 2006. We'll see if they change that up this year. Still ahead on